interviewed. So again, welcome everyone. This is Nick Wagner Sr. I'm here with Enrique Rubio, and this is another episode of the Full Potential Live Show. And tonight we are actually live streaming on both LinkedIn and YouTube. So I'm getting a little fancy, and we're doing some multi live streams going here. And then again, for everyone that's tuning in, that's listening to this post the live show, we'll share this on YouTube with video, and we'll also share this on all the major podcast platforms. So if you can't listen to Enrique tonight live, you can hear him on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, etc. So Enrique, first, thank you so much for making time. I know you are an extremely busy gentleman, so thank you for making time for this.
I love it. Sunday night, what best than having a cool conversation, laid back, and enjoying it.
I've tried to explain to people that this is better than football, right? I haven't convinced everyone yet, but here we're working on it. So let me just, I'm going to share a little bit about the show and what we're going to talk about, and then I'll have you introduce yourself, Enrique, so people can get a sense of who you are. So the whole idea of my show, the Full Potential Live Show, is to interview people with really interesting career stories. And I've interviewed people previously just on my podcasts. And then when LinkedIn opened up the beta, as Enrique knows, a bunch of us applied and they accepted some of us. And now we get to do this live on LinkedIn as well. So I've been doing the podcast / live show for a little over a year and a half now. And I've interviewed people from startups, entrepreneurs. I've interviewed people from the corporate world. I've interviewed people in nonprofits, really all sorts. Enrique, you actually fit like almost all the categories, right? Because you have a startup. You worked in like the more of the corporate setting. You've got another initiative going on with Hacking HR that I think a lot of people are going to want to hear about. So you really got a lot of different things going on. So if you want to share with the audience just like a little bit about how do you describe yourself when you introduce yourself to someone and someone who meets you for the first time?
Well, that's a great question. I think, I just say I'm Enrique, and I am very passionate about building community and connecting people. That's one of my biggest passions in the world. And right now, what I'm doing is I am an entrepreneur who who is building a large community of HR people, HR leaders, technologies, and whatnot. All of them getting together to discuss all things important at the intersection of future of work, technology, organizations, people, and of course how that all impacts the work of HR. So that's a little bit of how I introduce myself. And it's more complex than that, but that's kind of the headline of the thing.
Yeah, and that's what I want to dive into. So, and I think when people check you out on LinkedIn, they're like, wow, does Enrique sleep, right? Because not only do you have multiple different like businesses / startups going on, you're also I believe you're an ultra runner. And for those that don't know what that is, we're going to talk a little bit about that too. And what is ultra running, right? It is not for the faint of heart. I will tell you that much. So why don't we start, Enrique? Let's hear, kind of go back, right? So you're passionate about HR. You have multiple startups. My first question for you is kind of, where did this passion to be an entrepreneur come from? Was that something you learned from a family member or a friend early on? And then also the passion around HR, because not everyone loves HR like us. So I'm kind of curious how those two things came to be.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Actually, what's funny is my mom is visiting from Venezuela. I am in Florida right now. I don't live here, but I'm spending a couple of weeks here with her. And she was asking me about the ultra running, and I'm road tripping across the US. I love getting into the wilderness and spending time in nature, with animals and whatnot. And she tells me that she talks to my dad, and they say, like, where does he get these things from? Because it's not from us, like my parents. They are not that way. They are not entrepreneurial, and they are not like, they are not ultra runners or kind of like people who get in the wilderness like I do. And I think this has developed over time, right? If I think about myself, 15 or 20 years ago, I never thought that I was going to be spending time in the wilderness, with wild animals. I never thought that I was going to end up working in HR because my background is technology. I started my career working as an electronic engineer, and I did that for about 10, 12 years before switching to HR. So I think my career has evolved and has gone through very different places and has been in very different places. And honestly, I think that's what gives me the ability to connect things that for a lot of people may be disconnected, right? Especially in the HR world, where a lot of folks have been doing HR for a long time and they have not really seen anything else. So I think the passion has been, it doesn't come from anywhere as in like, this is the source. I think it's
Right.
more as in it's been sort of it's been accruing over time, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I think that, I have multiple things I want to kind of dive into there. So my first one is, and I'm similar to you, where I have a technology background and I moved into HR, which I don't think is a very common career path, is what I found out, right?
Yeah.
So you were originally an engineer.
Yeah.
So you went to school for engineering.
Yeah.
What type of work did you do as an engineer when you were done with school? Like what were you doing right after college?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I am an electronic engineer, and practicing electronic engineering for me, the work that I did was at telecommunications. So I did a lot of cell phone and radio network design. And what is funny about that is have you seen those towers where they have like antennas on top, to whatever.
Yeah.
I had to climb up those towers to install antennas when I started my career, 20 years ago, and I'm afraid of heights. So
that's terrifying.
So it is terrifying. And I remember some of my colleagues, they would they would just put on the harness and kind of like lost their grip or lose the grip from the tower. I would be like, hugging that tower. That was like a terrifying, part of my life. But that was part of what I did. Most of the work that I did was working, in a computer, designing networks and whatnot. But I also had to do that work in the field, and it was fascinating. It was really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also afraid of heights, so you couldn't pay me enough money to do that job. I would not survive at all. So, and I think my biggest question I think a lot of people probably have for you is, how do you go from being an electrical engineer to someone in HR, right? So how did you make that pivot, that career pivot? And were you searching for that career pivot, or did you just kind of happen to fall into it? Like, what's the background there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, you know what? When I was working in telecommunications, I had the opportunity to get into the sales, the telecom sales side of the company I was working for, and I discovered something that I didn't know that much about myself, which is, I really like, being in community and working with people, but I didn't know about myself that I loved that much working for others, like serving others. And I loved the work of sales, especially in technology, because first of all, that was my area of expertise, technology.
Right.
But at the same time, I was doing something that was making somebody else, either happy or fulfilled or something along those lines. So I thought about it and I said, I love working with people. It's so cool and it's fascinating, but I did not want to be in sales for the long term. I didn't think that was my passion. So I said, what is it that I can do that combines, this passion for people with something that, really serves them, right? And I looked at HR and I said to myself, well, then, maybe that HR is that field. And that's how I got into HR. It was basically this exercise of I want to work for others. I want to serve others because I find pride and passion and meaning in serving others in that way. And I think HR is meant to be that. Unfortunately, very often it is not that. It became something different, and that's why I'm so passionate about my work in hacking HR, which I guess we're gonna talk a little bit about that in the next few minutes. But the reason why I'm so passionate about that is because I think we have the potential to really, really serve people well,
Right.
and have them find joy and meaning and purpose and happiness in at work, and that's what I'm doing right now. Yeah, so
Well,
that's why I got into HR.
So it's interesting because I think a lot of people think of HR and the first thing they think of is, oh, do you do payroll, or do you discipline people, or do you recruit people? Those are like the three probably most common things people think of when they think of HR. And to your point, it's really evolved over the past 10 to 15 years, where it really is. It's a really strategic function at this point. It's very technology driven, which we're going to talk about. But I completely agree. So what was your first HR job, right? So you decide you want to move into HR. what was that first job that you had in HR that was actually like, oh wow, I've made it. I'm in an HR field now.
I created a consulting company back in Venezuela, my birth country. And this consulting company that I created was focused on leadership development, mostly leadership development. And one of the areas in which I focused on leadership development was for salespeople, because I was coming from sales.
Makes sense.
So it was leadership development with a component of sales. So it was really exciting to do that work of leadership development. And then I got a job. I left Venezuela. Well, Venezuela is going through a very hard time right now. So I left Venezuela. I came to the United States. I completed my master's degree, and then I got a job doing, performance management. And then, I switched to another functions in HR, but I started doing leadership development. That was my main focus when I switched from a hardcore technology into the HR world.
We have very similar career paths, because I went from technology to running a leadership development program for technology. So that seems like an interesting way that those of us that aren't HR professionals sneak into HR, right? That's what I tell people. I snuck into HR.
Yeah, because you bring something that you know how to do well.
Exactly.
And you plug it into a world that you're getting to know. But the way, and we may talk a little bit about this later, but the way I see the world is that the combination of seemingly disconnected things is what makes anybody truly successful and valuable. Because what happens is that if you ask a question that everybody else has asked before, you go to Google and Google has the answer for that. If you try to combine things in the same way that other folks have tried to combine them before, I mean, that's been done, right? But if you see something, two things that are like this totally disconnected, and then you're able to put them together, I mean, that's what makes something really powerful. And that's why concepts like, employee experience, bringing customer experience and HR together, design thinking in HR, bringing the concept of design into the HR world, agility in HR, bringing the concept of software into HR, that combination, which we were kind of like blinded to before, 15 or 10 or 15 years ago. Now that combination is extremely powerful, because you're bringing two things together that are truly valuable. And that's why, like the same way you started your career in HR, we're bringing all this concept of technology, sales, and we're plugging them in the work of HR, and we're bringing an additional level of value that those who have been in HR for all their lives may not be able to see, because they haven't been in any other field.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And we could probably spend an hour alone just talking about technology and HR and how they're being married together. I mean, honestly. Yeah. So you started your first business, your first entrepreneurial adventure was in Venezuela all the way back end of 2009. It seemed like that time frame according to LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And so that was your first taste of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And my question for you is, how different was it starting a business in Venezuela versus the United States?
Well, like there's red tape everywhere, right? And I think here is a little easier in the U.S., which is surprising, because I have to do the taxes right now, and I'm dreading it. And what I'm thinking is, what we gotta make it easier for people to be entrepreneurs in this country. If we are to continue to be, spearheading the world of innovation and entrepreneurship in the world, we have to make it easier. It's just insane the amount of things that entrepreneurs have to do in this country, in my country as well. But we don't have a culture of leading the world in innovation or leading the world in technology. This country has that culture, and we gotta make it easier. So it's different. Red tape wise, it's not that different, but I think that here, one of the things that many other countries in the world lack is the network of people who know, because they have been there before, and the community of support, whether financially or emotionally, that you can get, because a lot of people have gone through that journey in this country. So I think that even though the red tape could be very similar, in this country and in many other countries, I think the fact that there's a community here that has gone through that journey and has suffered the pains and the downsides of whatever you're going through right now, makes it easier for you, because you can tap into that network and ask them questions and rely on them. So I think in that regard, it may be a little easier to be an entrepreneur in this country than in most countries of the world.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I value your perspective, being a native Venezuelan and living there for so long, and working in more of a traditional job there and being an entrepreneur, I think you have great insight. So
Yeah, let me add one thing there,
yeah,
Nick. One thing that I've noticed, being a foreigner in the U.S. right now, and one reason why foreign entrepreneurs have been very successful in their journeys in the U.S. I think there are a couple of things in there. One of them is resourcefulness. I have such a hard time saying that word. Resourcefulness. And the reason for that is because our countries don't have as much as what we have here,
right.
right? I remember being an engineer in Venezuela, and I clearly remember, 20 years ago, I needed to build a robot for my thesis, and then there were, like, out of the 100 pieces that I needed, 50 you couldn't find in Venezuela. Here in the US, you go to Amazon or you go to whatever it is, and you click on something and you find that piece right away.
Yeah,
So we had, in our countries, we had to figure it out. We have to be resourceful enough to say, well, I don't have the piece that I need, but I'm gonna make one of my own. I'm gonna try to find another piece that can work for that. So we come here, and then when you see other folks suffering because maybe they are used to having everything at their disposal, for us it is something like, oh my goodness, I need 100 pieces to put this business together, but I only have 50. Well, let me figure out how I get the other 50, right? Because that's the mentality of scarcity of the countries where I come from.
mhm,
I mean, yeah. So I think that makes it really interesting. And when I have to go through all that red tape, I'm like, well, it's red tape, but it's less than in my country,
yeah.
or things of the kind, right? So I think that's a great kind of mindset when you can figure things out, when you don't have everything that you need.
I think that's great insight, and I appreciate you sharing that story, because I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think a lot of
Yeah.
us that have grown up in the U.S. just don't think of that. So again,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing. So let's talk a little bit about when you left Venezuela. What made you make that change and move from Venezuela to the U.S., and how hard was that? Because you just mentioned that your mother is visiting you from
Yeah.
Venezuela in Florida, so
Yeah.
it sounds like she still lives there. So how was that leaving your family, and what was that decision like?
No, it was really rough, and well, I love this country, and I feel that this is my home right now, and right now, and for the entire future. I think I love being here, and I'm very passionate about the things that happen in the country, from social economics, politics, everything. And to me, I left the country in 2011. I got a Fulbright scholarship to come to the U.S., and I came here, and I came to do my master's degree, and then I stayed because, well, my country's going through a very, very hard time right now,
Right.
and my brothers, they all fled the country a few years after I left, and they have all, one of my brothers, he lives here in the U.S., the other two live in other countries. My parents and my extended family, they are still in Venezuela, and it's really hard, because you see, like see my dad, not only getting old, but I see them. He's so thin right now because they don't have anything to eat in Venezuela. It's not just that. It's not just about money. I help them financially from here, but it's the fact that there's no money, there's no food, there's no medicines, there's no nothing. So it is hard. Like, I'm gonna connect this to something that I said before. It is hard when you have so much abundance here, to the point that you can actually waste some of that abundance. People here waste
Yeah.
anywhere between 20 and 50% of the food is wasted in this country. And then you think about the place where you come from, where people don't have anything to eat. And it is hard. It is emotionally hard to go to a store and find, this overwhelming abundance. And then you think, oh my goodness, my mom, when she goes back to Venezuela, she won't have any food. You know what I'm saying? So that's emotionally hard for me, and I still can't, come to terms. I don't even think, up to until the moment when my country is free again from our dictatorship. Until that moment, I think I'm going to continue having this thought of, I have so much abundance, and I still
Yeah.
have to be, very mindful about that.
Well, I mean, I think all of us wish the best for your family that's still living in Venezuela. So, best of luck to them, obviously, and
Thank you.
we hope they're safe, and everything works out. So, and I know that's probably harder for you to talk about that story, but we were talking earlier. I just I think you have a really interesting journey, moving halfway around the world. So it's, I think it's interesting to hear kind of how you made it to the U.S. So I'd love to hear. So you came here for graduate school. You had a full ride, and then according to your LinkedIn, it was interesting. You ended up working at the Inter-American Development Bank. So
Yes.
I don't think everyone's heard of the Inter-American Development Bank. So I'd love to hear like what that is. And it looked like you had multiple roles there, all within HR. So if you could kind of share what did you do there, and what was the purpose of that organization?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the Inter-American Development Bank is a developmental institution focused on providing financial support to the Latin American and the Caribbean region. So through the bank, loans, government and private sector organizations in Latin America and the Caribbean can do and implement and design development projects in the region. The bank does amazing job in several countries, building highways, doing environmentally sustainable projects, and in education, in climate change, in agriculture, in the infrastructure, in a number of things that the bank is working on. Fantastic job that they're doing. And yes, I had the privilege to work there, especially because of the purpose of the organization, which was helping. Actually, the motto of the organization is improving lives. So I felt really passionate about the motto of the Inter-American Development Bank when it came to improving lives in the Latin American and Caribbean region. So incredible work, with a fantastic mission. And yes, I worked there for 7 years. I worked there, and it was only 4 months ago that I left because, Hacking HR, which is this community that I created, has been doing, fairly well, and not financially yet, because I never thought about it as a financial or as a revenue generating community. All I wanted to do was create a community, and it's been pretty successful in that regard. And I'm experimenting on the revenue generating side now because, I don't have a job. I'm building. I'm living off my savings, and I'm really excited about it. Yeah, really excited about it. And so that's what the Inter-American Development Bank does, and that was my journey there.
And just based off of your background and where you grew up and what you went, what you decided to go to school for, and your passion for HR, it sounds like that was a really good fit for you from a career perspective.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you learned quite a bit about how HR is maybe done here in the U.S. versus how HR was done in Venezuela in that 6+ years there.
Yeah, and what's funny is that at the Inter-American Development Bank, because there are so many offices in so many countries, you got to have a global perspective. It's not just the U.S. I mean, we got a lot of people working in the U.S., right? But there are also a lot of people working from the region, and what that means is that you needed to have a very kind of comprehensive and global perspective to understand how each of those countries worked and adapt to their policies and understand their frameworks and whatnot. So very interesting. And I did learn a lot working in there. I strengthened a lot of my weak areas in HR, and I left knowing that we also have a great number of areas where we could do better as a function, not just at the Inter-American Development Bank, but in general as HR. Because being there, I got to know a lot of folks from HR from a number of companies, and I got to understand that many of our we have a lot of commonalities when it comes to the challenges that we're dealing with, but also when it comes to the pitfalls that we have in HR. Yeah.
And yeah, it sounds like a great learning opportunity, and especially because, I think this is really important for a lot of people listening, you did multiple roles there. You weren't in the same role there for your whole duration. You did multiple things, which I think moving around always helps you just expand your opportunities.
Yeah.
So you mentioned 4 months ago you quit your job there.
I did.
To focus
tomorrow. 4 months ago.
4 months ago tomorrow. Not that you're counting. To focus on Hacking HR. So why don't we talk a little bit about that? And I also want to talk about your other recruiting startup as well. But we'll start with Hacking HR. So what is Hacking HR? And for those listeners that are watching that don't know, and why did you found it? Like what's the intent?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Hacking HR is a global learning community designed for HR leaders, HR practitioners, technologists, consultants, vendors, and business leaders, anybody who is interested in learning about the intersection of all things future of work, technology, organizations, and people. And of course, that intersection basically encompasses everything that is going on right now in this new reality of work. And I'm mostly focused on helping HR as a function and the individuals within HR to get ready for all the things that are happening, to get their companies ready, to get their HR functions ready, and to get their workforce ready for all these things that are happening. And the way we
So
do
let
that,
me pause you right there, just
yeah,
because
sure.
I don't think my audience necessarily knows when you say future of work. Give us some examples of what you believe is coming from a future of work perspective that you are helping getting people ready for. Like, give
Yeah,
some examples of that.
absolutely. For example, technology will be there are two things that are very interesting in technology. One of them is the pace at which technology will be destroying jobs, and the pace at which well, actually three things: the pace at which technology will be destroying jobs, the pace at which technology will be creating jobs, and the pace at which technology will be transforming jobs. So let me start with the transforming jobs section of my comment. All the jobs will be transformed by technology over the next few years. Every single job. There's nothing that will remain the same. Zero. You and I are right now talking on a program that is called StreamYard, and this program just came out a few months ago. It didn't exist before, and I was using Wire. I continue to use Wirecast as a program to do LinkedIn Live, but now I'm using a little bit more StreamYard. So this technology is transforming the way you and I are connecting at this very moment, and maybe tomorrow there's going to be something else. So technology is transforming everything that we do. Technology is destroying jobs over the next 10 years. According to a report by McKinsey, about 800 million people could lose their jobs to automation.
Hmm.
From now to the year 2030, that is one fourth to one third of the global workforce. And then, the third element is the pace at which technology is creating new jobs. It is expected that by the year 2030, about 85% of the new jobs to be created will be new jobs. They don't exist today. So what happens with all these things is that technology is transforming, creating, and destroying jobs, and we need to either upskill or reskill ourselves to succeed and thrive in the middle of all this craziness that is happening right now. And part of the work that we're doing with Hacking HR is number one, creating awareness in people of all the things that are happening, especially HR folks, because I feel that in HR we continue to be so focused on the things that do not add much value anymore. They are the transactional kind of HR, policy, recruitment, and blah blah blah. And I think we need to, continue doing those things that pay less attention to the transaction and start paying more attention to the strategic thinking of what's going on right now. So we are, in HR, we are creating awareness of all things that are happening in this new sort of reality of work. And then the second thing that we're doing is bringing people together for them to create awareness together, but at the same time to collaborate, share, and learn from each other. Because in my view of the world, I think it's going to be very difficult, and I'm going to say almost, borderline with impossible for any institution, organization, city, country to be able to survive alone. We're going to have to, tear down walls, and that means, physical and mental walls, and start building bridges that connect people across the world, because a lot of trends are, radically transforming the nature of work and the workplace and everything, and we're going to need more of each other to be able to withstand all these changes and to survive in the future.
So no, I think that's well said.
A long long speech about
No,
the
no,
future of work.
I think you're spot on, and I think not everyone in HR like us came from technology backgrounds. So you and
Yeah.
I probably aren't surprised at what's happening and aren't that intimidated by what's happening. But there's a lot of HR professionals that do not come from technology background, and this is probably terrifying. So I think you having this perspective of we need to help educate everyone on what's going on, I think is great. So how do you do what you just mentioned? Right? How do you educate people and collaborate with people with this platform? Like what are your methods to do that? I know you use our the LinkedIn Live platform, but give our audience some examples of what you're doing to help spread the word.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're doing a number of things right now, and among the things that we're doing right now are, we create local communities, or local chapters, and these chapters bring people together, and they do events to talk about the intersection of future of work, technology, organizations, and people. So that's what's happening at the level of the chapters, and at the global level, we're doing a number of online events. to make sure that we are providing and ensuring access to democratizing access to information technology and some of the most talented, renowned, world class speakers in our programs, all for free. And to me, when I am able to bring some of those very talented, world class speakers to speak online to the majority of people who can't go to an event or
Yeah.
wouldn't have access to them, I think that's a way to create awareness and to educate people about all things that are happening right now. So, for example, we have in March, we have a Hacking HR signature 2020 event, which is called HR Innovation and Future of Work Global Online Conference and Workshop. We're doing 4 days of event all for free. It's going to be like about 60, 70 sessions, almost 100 hours of content. All is going to be for free. We're bringing more than 200 speakers and all for free, all online, all will be recorded. So, pretty cool stuff. Yeah.
So
So that's one of the ways we're using to educate people.
you bring up a great point, and I think a lot of people may not realize this, that most HR functions in companies are very small. So if you look at a lot of small and medium-sized businesses, it could be no more than 5 people. There's a lot of companies that only have 1 or 2 HR people.
Yeah.
So and to your point, they might not have the time or the resources from a funding perspective to travel to these conferences to hear different people talk and get these perspectives. So the fact that you're doing it for free and you don't have to travel for it really is unbelievable, because I'm sure that helps a lot of people.
That is exactly why I'm doing it this way. And, if you ask me why are you doing it online and free, you just said the answer. The answer is because most people in most companies in the world cannot
Correct.
travel to conferences. Why? Because it costs money and they don't have the money, or it costs time and they don't have the time. Now, if you think about it, I always say this, especially when people ask me, like, isn't Hacking HR competing with this or that community? And this is my answer all the time. There are approximately 12 million HR people in the world. If I am generous, I'm being very, very, very generous, there might be 200,000 of them, 200,000 of those 12 million participating in any kind of event,
Yeah.
whether in person or online. That is less than 3% of the entire universe of HR people in the world. So whenever somebody tells me, are you competitors with that one? I'm like, no. I mean, we should have many more events. We should bring more people up on board to do more events. And then the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing online free is because I want to make sure that those 12 million people, even though they're not signing up, and they should be signing up to my event, but even if they don't sign up, they have the option to do it, and they don't have an excuse. Nobody can come to me and say, oh, like, I can't learn because I don't have the money to travel to a conference. Well, sign up for the freaking Hacking HR thing that we're putting together, for you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a great point, and I think a lot of people probably don't realize that a lot of HR professionals don't have this professional development opportunity that you're providing. Yeah. So I think that's fantastic, and we'll make sure, Enrique, to include any link you want to your different initiatives and businesses in the show notes, both on YouTube and the podcast, so people can find out how to get a hold of you and Hacking HR. And just want to get involved. So it sounds like the event in March is going to be great, and people will be able to learn a lot. So let me kind of rewind a little bit. So when you started Hacking HR, which I think was 2017, according to LinkedIn, what was your initial drive to start this? And did you think from your time in HR that this was just missing, and you're like, I'm going to take this upon myself and make this happen, or was there something else that kind of triggered it?
I think it was 2 things, and very candidly, and talking about it is 2 things. The first one is, I thought that we needed this in HR, and the entire idea of how this started was I wanted to connect technology and HR, so I wanted to talk about those things. So that's the why.
Right.
Now, I wanted to bring people from HR together with people from technology, and I wanted to put them together to start talking about how the hell we were going to survive, the times that we're living in, right? Which are times of people and technology, and that powerful combination. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is that in my job, I I was doing the kind of HR that I don't think we should be doing anymore, which is very day-to-day operational. And I reached a point where I was like a robot doing things like, almost with my eyes closed in the computer. And I thought to myself, you know what? I am a very creative, ingenious person. I have all these things that I want, that I'm imagining. I'm very curious, and which I think are my main personal assets. That I am a freaking, question asker, and very inquisitive, and I didn't feel, and I didn't think that I was finding that outlet in my job. I feel I was doing a good job, and I was, respected for the job that I was doing, but it was like probably 5% of all that I could do. And then
Yeah.
when I wanted to tap into the other 95%, then you find, this big wall of, bureaucracy, politics. And this is true not just for the place for, in which I worked. It is true for most places. If you actually think, it's funny, if you look at the history of the Twitters, the WhatsApps, the Instagrams, the Slacks of the world, most of those people were coming from large companies where they didn't
Yeah.
have a,
You're
a
right.
creative outlet. You know what I mean? So I hope I become something like them eventually, right? But in the meantime, what I thought to myself was, I want to find a creative outlet for this energy that I have in me, that is being wasted here because I can't use it within the four walls of the place that I'm working for. So I said, I'm gonna do something outside, and that outside was hacking HR. So I found a place to combine the passion to bring technology, HR, people, future of work together with the creativity, the curiosity, and the imagination that defines who I am.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and
So that's the story.
now you're doing it. You made the jump to do it full time. So,
Yeah.
but I want to pause for a second, because not only are you doing hacking HR, you have another startup um,
Yeah.
around recruiting that you're also doing. So, can you tell the audience a little bit about that? What that entails, and how that became what it is.
Sure. Well, with my business partner Ernesto Umpieres in Cotopaxi, that's the name of our platform. It's called Cotopaxi Recruitment. What we do is we provide a powerful technology for Latin American companies. So everything is in Spanish for Latin American companies to do, to tap into a pool of candidates via social media. And the way we do that is that the system, the platform that we created allows you to create not social media, I'm sorry, like job profiles. And when you create a job profile, whether with our suggestions or the customizing that you do in the platform, the software, what it does is it goes to social media and it starts looking for people who have a background, or yeah, basically a background closely related to the job profile that was created. So this is all in Spanish, and we launched it about a year and a half ago. We've been going through a lot of beta testing and feedback and whatnot, and we hope that this year becomes a great year for our platform. We have invested a lot of time, especially my business partner. He has invested a crazy amount of time and energy and passion into doing this thing, and we hope it goes well. And it's called Cotopaxi because Latin America, we have we love mountains. My partner and I, we both love mountains, and Cotopaxi is the name of a volcano in Ecuador. It's a beautiful place, and that's why we named Cotopaxi.
Very interesting.
Yeah,
So you're a little busy, is what I gather, right? So
good busy.
uh,
It's good busy.
it's good. No, absolutely. So it sounds like when you do something, Enrique, you are super laser focused. You're uber passionate. You're all in on it, and that's with your HR work. That's with your startups. Is that how the ultra running became what it is, right? Because I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the ultra running. And for my listeners, can you explain what ultra running is? Because it's not just long distance running; it's a lot more than that. So, kind of share what is ultra running.
Yeah, sure. And ultra running is running anything that is over a marathon. So normally the minimum distance that usually qualifies as an ultra marathon is a 50K, which is 31 point some miles. So you got 50Ks. The most well known ones are 50Ks, 50 milers, and 100 milers. Of course, there are races that are 120 miles. There are 200 milers. There are 240 milers. and even more than that. So I've done several 50Ks, I've done several 50 milers, and I've done several 100 milers. I haven't done anything over that. Not because I don't want it, because they are too expensive to sign up for, and I'm not willing to spend that money in a race. And you know, maybe not that much for a 50K or for a 50 miler, which you usually finish in one day. Normally for people like me, I'm not a slow runner, but I'm not the fastest runner. I'm like, kind of like, if you split up the groups in four groups, like the fast middle pack, the slow middle pack, and the slow pack. I'm more into like, the fast middle pack. And even though, being in the fast middle pack, for me it takes usually more than a day. My fastest 100 miler was 26 hours
Wow.
running, straight, no sleeping or nothing. The slowest was 35 hours. So when you get into this world, what happens is that you learn to tolerate the intolerable, which is, high level of pain, and high level of wanting to quit. It comes to your mind very often that you want to quit, because you're thinking, oh my goodness, what am I doing with my life, spending 20 plus hours in the mountains, like I should be just watching TV, at home. So what happens when you're going through all those pains is that, first of all, the first thing that I think about is, I'm here because I want it. Nobody put a gun on my head to sign up to this thing. I am not forced to be here. So because I wanted it, suck it up and do what you need to do to move on. So that's one thing that I do to sort of like bear the pain that comes along with running these long distances. Then the second thing that I do is break it down in sections, right? So I don't, like, it's when you think about running 100 miles, that is really overwhelming. So you think like, in these races there are 8 stations, which is like, 8 stations where you get aid, water, some food and whatnot, every certain number of miles. Some of them are, 5, 7, 10, 20 miles. So I think, the next 8 station is 7 miles from here. Let me make it there. And then when I get there, the next one is 5 miles from here. So let me make it there. So the mindset that I have brought to myself by doing this is, building stamina for
Mhm.
me, focusing on achieving my goal, even though I go through pain in the process, and breaking it down into sections that I can comprehend. It's, I know what 5 miles look like. I know what 10 miles look like. Now 100 miles in the mountains where I run is like, oh my goodness, this is insane. But let me break it down in a smaller pieces. And this ethos of work, I bring it to everything that I do. I know that the race in which I am right now, building Hacking HR, my vision for Hacking HR is to build the largest community of HR collaboration and connection in the world. I'm not that much into how many people we have. I'm much more into how many people we have that are connecting and that are working together.
Yeah.
This is a long-term race. This is a 100-mile race, and I'm bringing these ideas of what I do out there in the ultra race, ultra marathon world, into this entrepreneurial activity, if you will.
No, I think that's I love the story. You are a brave man for doing those races. Clearly, you again, you have a lot of passion for what you do, and I love that. So
Thank
why
you.
don't let's I want to ask you a couple rapid fire questions, then we'll close with the same question I ask everyone during my interview. So a couple rapid fire questions that we'll go through quickly. So what was the first job you ever got paid to do, like when you were a kid? Your first paying job?
I was delivering mail and they paid me really badly, and I was really upset when I
Okay.
delivered my first envelope and I came back and they paid me like whatever they paid me, and I'm like, really? I've been like, like running around the city for like 5 hours, and this is you're gonna pay me? That's the one and last time that I did it, but that was the
That
first
is
job I
funny.
got.
Okay.
Yeah.
Biggest accomplishment of your career?
Hacking HR.
Hacking HR. Okay.
Yeah.
Biggest disappointment of your career?
I was fired, and for being an entrepreneur. This was a little over 10 years ago, and that really sucked, because I didn't do like anything wrong, from like I didn't steal money or like insulted anybody. I was doing my job as a technologist, and I created my side gig, totally not related to my company, and the president of the company said like, oh, you're fired. I was really disappointed about that.
Wow. Okay.
And HR didn't do anything, and then that started creating in me the idea that HR needed to do better.
Oh, fair. Um, person that's had the biggest impact on your career?
I had a boss many, many years ago, and he was a fantastic boss, 15 plus years ago. And, he was very inspirational. And I remember him saying, I remember something that he said to me, and this I never forget. When I worked for a very small company and I was moving to a very large transnational company. And I asked him, I'm confused. I don't know what to do. And he said to me, there you're going to be just one piece in a big corporate machinery, corporate operation. So if you stay or you leave, maybe it doesn't really matter. Here, this is small. And if you leave, it's going to be very painful for us. So keep that philosophy when you go out there, because if you're doing something for a small group of people, you are more noticeable, and you become a more important piece of the everything. And that's why I think so many more people are trying to do entrepreneurship now, because they want to feel that they are valued, that they matter, that they are important, that they belong, that what they do is truly, truly valuable, as opposed to working for something that probably people don't even know that you're there, right?
Yeah, no, that's well said. So last rapid fire, thing you're most excited for in 2020?
Making Hacking HR a truly awesome community. We're building an amazing offering. We launched a program called Grow for the next generation of chief people officers. We're going to launch a program for seeding CHROs of small to medium sized companies. We're launching a program called Cultivate for HR students. We're launching an app, which I hope to be ready, in 3 or 4 months, for it to be ready. So, and I'm hoping to create many, many more chapters than we have right now. So I'm hopeful about the future of Hacking HR as a very, very fantastic place for people to come together, and in a very safe place, and in a very candid way, to come and find the kind of network that can support your growth and your improvement and the betterment of the HR function. To me, it's a chain of, if we create a better HR, we create a better workplace, and if we create a better workplace, we create a better world. In my view of the world, besides politicians, besides the famous and the rich, and besides business leaders, HR have the most amount of impact on the most amount of people. And if we can transform the work that we do in HR, we can transform the end result of an organization. And therefore, we're going to be transforming the way people live their lives. So you can tell the high hopes that I have in HR, right?
No, it's great. It's an interesting way of thinking about it. So last question. I always close with this with every guest. So you've clearly been very successful in your career, which hasn't even been that long. You have a long career ahead of you, which I'm sure you're going to do great things. What is the one piece of advice you'd give my listeners and all of your followers as well, Enrique, that has helped you reach your full potential? So what is that one thing that's really helped you be so successful?
Be fearless. Be fearless. Things will happen when you're fearless. You're gonna get fired from a job, and it's gonna suck. Or you're gonna create a business like I did before, and I invested all my savings in that business, and it didn't work, and I went back to ground zero, compared to where I was at that moment. But when you're fearless, great things happen. Some things that are not that great will happen because you're building a journey of amazingness. And to do that, you need to be fearless. So be fearless. Get ready for the consequences of being fearless, but do it, because the taste of the amazingness that you're building for you is just unfathomable and unmatched by anything else.
That's great advice. So again, Enrique, thank you so much for making time. I know between running 2 startups and doing ultra marathons and ultra running, which I can't even imagine how much time that takes, and visiting you said you're visiting your mother in Florida, so you took time away from your family to be with all of us tonight. So thank you.
Thank you.
We will make sure to share all of your information in the show description on both YouTube and on all the major podcast platforms, so people can get in touch with you. Of course, people can contact you on LinkedIn, Enrique Rubio on LinkedIn. Just do a search, you will find him. He has tens of thousands of followers on LinkedIn. So I really appreciate you making time. It was a great conversation. I think you've had a fantastic career journey, and I'm just so grateful you were able to join me tonight.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you so much for the invite. It was a very fantastic conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Have a great night. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.